that gets pretty expensive with film technology. Okay, so now I see we're being recorded, so we'll continue.
You're safe. You're safe, Dick. You're safe, Dick.
Okay, thank you.
So the beast you see sitting here on my dining room table is my camera that I really enjoy using. It's a Nikon D500. It came out about 6 or 7 years ago, but the thing I really like about it, it has a phenomenal autofocus capability. It rarely fails to get the subject in focus, even if the subject is in amongst branches or clouds or people or whatever happens to be in the way. If you get the little diamond in the center on that subject, you've got a 90% chance that you're going to have the subject in focus, which is really a very nice thing. The lens that is attached to the D500 is a 200 to 500 millimeter lens. Just for reference, a 50 millimeter lens is what your eyeball sees. So if you have a 100 millimeter lens, it means it's 2x. If you have a 400 millimeter lens, it is 4x, etc. So by the time you get out to 500, you're looking at fairly significant magnification. And then, since the sensor in this camera is 2/3 of the size of a full frame sensor, you have a further magnification as well. So this lens combination right here gives you somewhere around 750 millimeter of magnification. Now, having said that, you can do wildlife photography without, putting lots and lots of money into camera equipment if you are lucky enough to get close to your subject, because cell phone cameras these days have really come a long way and they have great technology. And as I will show you as I go through some of the pictures here, you can get some pretty interesting photographs with your cell phone as well. So,
and Alex, we should mention, I forgot to mention earlier that Alex had said that if people have questions, just ask as he's going. And probably the best way to do that, since somehow I can't see everybody's face, but I can see your name, is to just raise your hand down below under reactions. And that way we'll know that you have a question.
Yes, I'm happy to do my best to answer any question that you have, whether it's for technology or story involved with a photo or information about the subject or whatever happens to be.
I have a question. It's
Yeah.
Is this a DX camera or a full frame camera?
This is a DX camera.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so the story behind this is I was out on Long Pond in my photographic boat, which is an 8-foot boat with a 2.5 horsepower motor, which is very quiet, but unfortunately also very slow. And over my head flew an eagle. He flew over Blueberry Island in Upper Long Pond and landed on the other side. I knew something was up because there was a whole group of crows which were flying around, and they often hassle eagles, especially if the eagle has something to eat or is hunting. So it took me about 15 minutes to get there, but as I rounded Blueberry Island, this particular eagle went crashing into the water and emerged with what you see here is a fish. Hopefully those of you who are looking at this can see that he's in his talons right here. He's got a pretty nice looking fish. And the way he's flying is that an eagle will always keep you in sight. They're uncanny in that regard. Eagle eye is a very accurate statement. So here he is looking through the feathered tips of his wing at me as he's flying off with breakfast for the brood. So on his way, he stopped for breakfast and he ate part of the fish. You can see it's been somewhat hacked on here, but he's in full flight, moving right along. And one of the things about wings, which are really interesting to see, is the way the finger, almost like fingertips at the end, and they can move these feathers to really do fine adjustment of their flight pattern. And the fish now is pretty much half gone, isn't it? And So he is now probably thinking, if they do think that way, what is the family going to say when I show up with half breakfast? One of the keys to wildlife photography is the eye. Whenever you take a picture of a bird or an animal or whatever, if you can include the eye, it's really, really important. And if the eye is out of focus for some reason, just throw the picture out, because no matter what else you do, if the eye is not clear with a light reflex, see that little white light reflex in the eyeball? That's pretty much ubiquitous in a well-focused eye shot. So here we are, birds in flight, getting back to the nest, and this is who is awaiting breakfast. So these are two immature eagles. They have been raised pretty much on the way to maturity. They are able to fly at this point, but they are not able to hunt on their own. So they're still being fed. In this particular nest, which is near Lynch Cove on Long Pond, I was there one day and watched surf and turf happen, and that one parent showed up with a fish, and then shortly thereafter, another parent flew in with a squirrel. And so the two young eagles there disappeared into the nest and had surf and turf for breakfast. The interesting thing here is that this nest is huge. Eagle's nest can weigh up to 100 pounds. I'm guessing this one may weigh probably 50. And the reason it's relatively small is that it fell down last fall in a storm. And I was very concerned that the eagles would not return, but darned if they didn't rebuild the entire nest in a workmanlike and precipitous fashion early on this season. So by the time the end of April rolled around, they had a nest that they could put their eggs in. So they were in really good shape. So having gotten back from that adventure, I headed over towards my camp and found this guy waiting for me. So this is a blue heron, and they're very curious birds. Well, once again, though, see the eye, there it is, nice and clear, looking right at you. The beak is somewhat translucent because you can see the sun coming through it. And they have these beautiful feathers coming off the chest. And one of the things that I was not aware of until I started taking photographs was this reticulated pattern which goes down to the front of their neck. These birds look to have a very delicate, thin neck, but I'll tell you, they can sit there and swallow something the size of a tennis ball. And to watch that bolus start in the mouth and go all the way down to the neck into the gullet is really a phenomenon. It gives you a sore throat sometimes just thinking about the bird trying to swallow something so large. So as I approached this bird, he was curious until the point where he was not curious anymore and decided it was a good idea to leave the scene. So here he is in full flight. And again, there's the eye. And what I didn't realize is that these birds, Dick, you'll enjoy this, they're radio controlled, okay? Because I always wondered, this is a right here.
Yes.
So now I understand a little bit more about the behavior. But one of the things I've also noticed in that with these birds is the beautiful variations in color from light gray to dark gray. And these patches on the tips of the wings are actually somewhat more golden in color in some of the exposures that you'll see. And to wit, on the next slide here, you'll see this fellow who's now got his wings spread.
Oh,
And there are those golden patches. Not that corresponds to probably the wrist. But anyway, there they are. So he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different groups of feathers, you know, on one side that I can see. And those people that are expert with birds can probably tell me that there are far more. So he's just about, see, he's not landed yet. He's just about to land because his feet aren't actually on the rock yet. But their color is very nicely camouflaged. It's very similar, if you think about it, to the color of these boulders with lichen and so forth on them as well. So So about 2 years ago, I went down the Kennebec River, which has been really nicely rehabilitated since the removal of the Edwards Dam. And when we launched from Waterville, and shortly downriver from Waterville, I came upon yet another heron. And this one had just finished spearing a fish. They don't grab the fish. Well, a small fish, they'll actually grab with their beak, like grabbing it between your thumb and your forefinger. But a bigger fish, they harpoon them. And that is a real formidable weapon. And I think loons do the same thing, don't they, Dick? They can use that beak
They
as
can, yes,
Yeah.
they can.
Yeah.
Yeah, from my understanding.
Yeah. So this poor fish is been harpooned, and he's going to be eaten shortly. But the heron will go through all kinds of manipulations to get that fish in just the right place so they can swallow it. So this bird will swallow that entire fish whole. That's what I mean about their neck. See how short and plump his neck looks here, as opposed to the picture I showed you before. So anyway, this is an interesting phenomenon. One of the things I like about this picture is the bird was in shadow, but there was a break in the foliage overhead so that the light was coming through. So it's lighting up a patch down here, and it's lighting up his head. And of course, the eye is quite prominent and clear as well. So that's one of the reasons I picked this photograph, not only because of the behavior of the bird, but because of the lighting that made the picture stand out. Any questions or comments so far?
I just have a quick question. For each of these photographs, how many other shots did you take that were similar that you have to select from the best from?
It depends. Barbara, I think probably the average might be 4 or 5.
Uh-huh.
The camera will take, depending on what the setting is, it'll take up to 10 frames a second.
Uh-huh.
So it really sounds like a machine gun. And but it's interesting, even within a second time, there are subtleties within the picture which will make it a keeper or one you want to get rid of. Birds have a membrane over the eye called a nictitating membrane. It's almost like our eyelid, except it's semi-transparent, and it acts like an eyelid. In other words, when they blink with this, and it moisturizes their eye. So sometimes you'll catch a great picture, but the nictitating membrane will be down over the eye, and so it looks cloudy and it spoils the picture. So, all right. So speaking of light, these are barn swallows, and they're tucked up on a rafter in my almost 200-year-old barn. And it was almost pitch black in there. So I had to get a picture of these guys, I had to get way up on a ladder and set up my camera and open the lens open wide to get as much light as possible, and then set the speed as low as I dared without getting a blurred picture, and waited. And birds are phenomenal. They know when mom is coming with a meal. You can't hear it. You have no sense that something's happening until all of a sudden these guys will pick up their heads, open their mouths, and sure enough, mom will appear with breakfast, lunch, dinner, or snack. So this is the feed me picture with barn swallows. Pictures of wildlife doing something are much more interesting than pictures of wildlife just sitting there. And I like this one for that reason. We are blessed with a male-female cardinal this year. And one of the courtship behaviors is feeding. And the male here has just picked up a sunflower seed and it has given it to his mate. And I can tell you now, several weeks later, that she responded to that, because now there's a bunch of little ones running around. And it's just not cardinals that like this kind of behavior. Check this out. Now, if you were a female bluebird, wouldn't you respond to an offering like that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, that is one juicy June bug. But you know, she does not, she's standing there, she's sort of not sure. I don't think that she's really all cheesed up about that, but could be. But
Hey, Alex, quick question. How did you get the solid green background? What is that all about?
well, the bokeh of the lens, if you have a telephoto lens, obviously it doesn't have everything in focus from 10 feet away all the way to infinity. It focuses at a certain distance from your camera.
Right.
And everything else in the picture is influenced by the bokeh characteristics of the lens. And this particular lens will blur everything out and just pick out the predominant color. And the background here was my front field, which was green at this time. So it just kind of put everything together. And so I have a green background.
Is that another setting to enhance that, as opposed to seeing variations of blurred branches or blurred foliage?
No, not really. If the wider open your lens is, the shorter your focus area.
Mhm.
So you're going to get more of this type of an effect with a lens which is open to say 2.8 as opposed to one that's at 8 or
Yep.
11 or something like that.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So we have a suet feeder outside of our southern facing windows, and lo and behold, on a really rainy day about 2 weeks ago, scarlet tanager appeared, and he's been hanging around ever since. So I think he has a mate somewhere around. So we're very pleased with this. But once again, there's a nice clear eye, and he is obviously quite soaking wet. And there's that green background that you had mentioned. Dick.
Mhm.
You get some raindrops here flying through various places here. You can see some raindrops coming by, and it's a raindrop which is causing a blur right here in front of the wing
Ah,
and down on that leg.
very astute, yeah.
Okay. Once in a while, you can get a situation where the astronomical beings line up. And I happened to be out early one morning, and my resident eagle was sitting up on his perch. His mate was down tending the young ones. And I happened to notice that there was a full moon out. So this did not happen serendipity. I maneuvered my boat around so I got the moon in back of the eagle, and decided that was a nice way to make the photograph more interesting. So
Wow.
there's the eagle guarding the moon. Now, as climate has changed, we've seen new species up here, and one of them of note is the Sandhill Crane. 10 years ago, I don't remember seeing any of them. Over the last 10, 15 years, they've really increased. They're usually residents of out west and southwest, but they're beautiful birds. And this one was in the field across from the Belgrade Cemetery. And someone tipped me off that the bird was there. And so I hustled over there, and sure enough, there he was. They have interesting characteristics. Once again, there's the eye, but look at the nostril. You can see from one side all the way through and out the other side. The nostril hole goes all the way through the upper beak from one side to the other. And they have a very nice feather variation with lots of nice colors and so forth. And again, here's the focus plane. The focus plane, here's the bird, and the grass, which is really next to the bird, is all in focus. But if you get too far in front of the bird or too far in back of the bird, your focus plane is obliterated, and you have this characteristic called bokeh, which in this picture I think is particularly attractive. We have a lot of these birds nesting in the lower marshy areas on Messalonsky Lake, offshore from Hammond Lumber Company. And you'll often see people down there with tripods and telescopes and everything else trying to get a hold of good photographs and images of these birds. I shoot all my pictures handheld. The camera is good enough. It allows me to do that. But it's a heavy camera. It's almost like going to the gym, but it's a lot more fun, I'll tell you. One of the ways that I've enjoyed taking pictures of wildlife is I have a general idea where they're likely to be. There's a farm on the road down to Longfellow's greenhouse from here on the right-hand side. You probably noticed it. The house is on one side, the barns and cattle are on the other side. And there's a big old snag tree which is dead, and all the branches up at the top. And it's a great place for red-tailed hawks to hang out, because it's right above the manure pile and other refuse where rodents tend to be. So these guys hang out up here and wait for a meal to come along. And this particular morning, they were looking at each other. I believe one of these is a male and the other is a female, but I cannot tell the difference from this picture. Someone who's a more sophisticated birder could probably do so, but they were very accommodating that morning. The other place you can see wildlife is on the coast, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to go boating from time to time out of Rockland. And there's a particular ledge out there where I'm very likely to find harbor seals. And I was out there one nice warm sunny day when I encountered this guy. And life is good. I mean, you know, he's got his own private perch there. Nothing's bothering him at all. He's probably full of fish. And he's just chilling out there on the ledge. And of course, the seagull appeared there just for interest. Any comments or thoughts, or anybody have anything that they want to ask? Okay. Again, people will tell you what's going on if they know that you're interested and like to take pictures. And one of the residents around here was kind enough to tell me that on their farm, please excuse my clock, on their farm, they have a swampy area, which has traditionally been a nesting area for great blue herons. But over the last year or so, a great horned owl has moved in and taken over the nest. The great horned owl appears to be the king predator around here, aside from eagles. They will displace osprey and heron or anything else that gets in their way. And so as a result, this particular season, which was last year, there were 2 cute little great horned owlets sitting in the nest. And this was from a fair distance away, probably about 100 yards, I would think. And I was in the woods at the end of this marsh, and they're sitting there, and you can see one of them's a little sleepy, but the other one is really quite wide-eyed, and they're waiting for mom. And I know mom is coming, but I don't know when. So I must have waited there for an hour and a half, still nothing. And then all of a sudden, in back of me, I was aware of this whirring sound. And I can't really describe it, except it put the hairs up on the back of my neck. And right over my head flew Mother Owl, and I could tell she had something in her talons. Wasn't sure what. And I knew she was heading for the nest, so I didn't move my camera. I left it right on the nest. And then out of the top right-hand corner of the picture came mom. And so the camera, as Barbara mentioned, asked me the question before, the camera started taking 10 frames a second of this process. And I had a series of these of Mother Owl coming in with what is actually a milk snake. And you can see from the eyeballs, again, importance of eyeballs, those chicks are absolutely riveted on her. So they set off the alarm for me in terms of knowing she was coming in, which enabled me to get this picture. Otherwise, this whole thing happened in about 3 seconds and I would have missed it entirely. She would have landed in the nest and I wouldn't be able to see anything. So good fortune.
So I have a question, and I know the answer to this question because Alex has showed me this picture before and I was fascinated by it. I think it'd be interesting for other people to hear. Alex, how long did you have to wait for this shot?
Well, to get this shot actually took me 3 days. The first day was the chicks were there and they weren't doing much of anything. They were just sitting there with their eyes half closed. And so after a few hours, I got bored and went home. And then the second day, mom was in the nest with them, but she did not leave. So after a couple pictures of the 3 of them in the nest, there was not really too much more of interest going on. Then the third day, when she was absent, I knew that she was going to come back probably with something, and it was worth waiting for. So
one quick follow-up question, Alex. So I assume that one of the prerogatives of being a great nature photographer is just patience.
Yeah, patience and being retired, Anthony. That's no day job. Very important. For sure. It does take a lot of time. There's no doubt about it. It takes time and being in the right place, the right time, and in this case, also with the right equipment.
the town managers are out?
Yes.
All right.
All right.
Duly noted.
Behavior is interesting, as I mentioned before, and this loon is not landing. He's not taking off. He's trying to establish his territory. And they do this if there's a pair of males and there's a female around, or they figure it's their territory, they will do this type of thing. It's almost like they're running and about to take off, but they never really do. It's a crazy figure of 8 pattern. There's lots of splashing and hollering and wing beating and everything else. And so, as you can see, the spray flies, and it's almost like whichever loon kicks up the most spray and makes the most commotion ends up with the girl, I guess. But anyway, that's what was going on. And then, as a result of that, we have a loon here she's sitting on her nest. There is a single egg underneath there, and she looks quite content in this picture. This was taken about 3 weeks ago. And Dick, can you enlighten us? This is Long Pond North. Has she hatched her chick yet? I think, has Dick left us? Okay, I guess so. Anyway.
He's still there, but he's on mute. Dick, can you hear?
Me unmute. Yes, it was hatched 2 days ago. It was the first one on the Great and Long Pond. So, and now as you mentioned, we have 2, but yeah, that was on Castle Island North 2 days ago.
Last year, this loon, I think it's this loon, I have no way of knowing, sat in this nest in the same place, and we had a freak northeaster storm, which literally blew it right out of the water. The water came right up over there and cleaned the nest out. So she was not successful last year, but this year I'm glad to hear that she is.
Yeah.
So this is the next step. These little chicks are quite dependent. And now remember I told you about the nictitating membrane. Here's mom, nice eye in focus and so forth, but the chick looks like something's wrong with that eye. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that membrane is down over the eye. And if this picture was a little bit different in terms of timing, that eye would be looking right at me probably. But things are moving pretty quickly here. You see that the chick is moving quite rapidly. So there's a water drop, which is actually a somewhat spray, just actually flying off of the chick's head. So the chick is in the process of climbing up on top. And if you can just see the top of another head there. So there's 2 chicks. This is up in Beaver Cove last year. And of course, these guys have voracious appetites, and mom will dive repeatedly and dad will dive repeatedly. And about 1 out of 3 or 4 dives, they'll come up with something for the chick. So 2 out of 3 times they'll come up empty beaked, and they'll have to get some air and head back down for another attempt. And their favorite meal seems to be crayfish. So here's mom. Beads of water still on her head, which it makes the photographs kind of interesting. And she's literally handed the crayfish to the youngster who's got it by the tail. And here you see that nictitating membrane is gone. You can see the black pupil there in the center. And you can see how their downy coat here is very, very water repellent. The water just stays in little globules and doesn't get anywhere near their skin. Same thing with mom. And loons also have this nostril here, which goes all the way through from one side to the other. Just happened to notice that. So here's mom with a successful dive, another crayfish, picked up a little bit of native plant material along with it. And shortly thereafter, she made a 180 and turned around and handed off breakfast to that chick. This was early morning.
Show the picture.
So every once in a while, a loon will show off. And this is on Maranacook Lake. And they'll say, look at me. You just got finished saying that eyeballs are very important. Well, I want to show you that I can show off without any eyeballs in the picture whatsoever, because I am perfectly symmetrical very proud of it. And so here I am.
Wow.
Spectacular animal. I can see why everyone gets so enthralled with them. Very easy to do. You never know when you're going to run into something. I walked down my driveway a couple of years ago. I happen to have my camera. I have no idea why. But when I got to the bottom of my driveway, I looked up and this is what I saw.
Wow.
An osprey was using the top of a telephone pole at the bottom of my driveway for a butcher block. Now, I have no idea where the osprey got that fish. The only body of water around here that would work that way for the osprey would be either a Belgrade stream or Messalonsky, and I suppose it could have been either place. So either way, that bird flew probably at least half a mile with that. And why he decided to do that on top of my phone call, I have no idea, but I was grateful. So he stayed there for a while until he was through eating, and off he went. Another place you can find osprey, which are fishhawks by name, I guess you'd call them, is on the coast. And there's a particular area in the area between Vinyl Haven and North Haven where there is a day mark. Day marks are green markers with numbers on them placed on top of reefs or rocks so that the unwary boater can be aware and avoid them. But they're also favorite nesting places for osprey. Almost every day mark is festooned with a osprey nest. And if you're fortunate enough to time your cruise by at high tide, that means the top of your boat is up high enough so that you're not looking up at the bird, you're looking more or less directly at them. You have the ability to get a shot like you would for a person. You're both on the same plane as opposed to one person being one flight up and you at the bottom. And so this is a female. You can see that because they have this necklace, if you want to call it that. And she's not happy with my proximity. And as I went cruising by, I was able to take this picture, and I call this picture Defiance because that's the word I get from it. And as I cruised by, I got, maybe another 40 or 50 feet away, and she come right back down in her nest and was quite happy. So it was only a momentary disturbance on her part. So I don't feel too badly about it. I got a great picture out of it anyway. Another place that the osprey like to nest in this particular season is a 55-gallon drum, which is anchored to the floor of Rockland Harbor in the center of the harbor. And for a couple of years, I'm anxious to see if they're doing it this year, but for a couple of years, the osprey nested on that barrel, which again was a great opportunity because you could go out in your boat, go upwind, shut off the motor, and drift back in a very slow fashion so that the birds weren't disturbed, and you could get a shot like this. So once again, we have a female, and here's the baby over here. And what's the most striking thing to you about this picture? Once again, it's the eye, isn't it?
Right, yes.
What a
100%.
yeah, what a difference in color.
Hey, Katie.
So the immature osprey is a reddish pink, and the mature is a yellow.
What is the red line that's ending up on your photos?
I don't know. I was wondering if I moved a marker on it, but I have not that I'm not aware of.
That, I apologize. This is Jay. Somehow I was touching the screen and it did that mark, and I can't figure out how to get rid of it. I apologize because they're beautiful pictures.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wait.
That's okay. As long as I'm not the guilty person, have at it.
Oh, I apologize. I am the guilty person.
Okay. Well, thank you. No problem. So this almost looks like a studio shot. And again, it was because I was able to get proximal to this bird. This is a couple of weeks later, and now you can see that that eye is beginning to become more yellow than red. And so it's just a great illustration of to how the eye changes as the bird matures. This picture was taken, oh my gosh, almost 10 years ago now, I think. And if you're ever wondering what it looks like to be the prey, have a prey's eye view of an incoming osprey. That's what it looks like.
Thanks. Mm.
No, I can feel those. I can feel those things in the back of my neck just looking at that picture. So that fish or whatever doesn't have a chance of getting away. 4 big hooks on each leg. And then, of course, you always expect the unexpected when you live in Maine, especially if you live on a farm and you can look out in your back field from your shower in the morning and you are greeted with turkey mating season. Yeah. So these guys are out there, and obviously they are very focused on impressing this hen. So I don't know about you, but I don't think she looks very impressed.
I don't think so.
No. And I've seen this situation. Sometimes it's hilariously funny. My wife, Kathy, and I sometimes are just dissolving in gales of laughter because sometimes we have some really windy days up here and you'll have a scene like this and the wind blows so hard and these guys have their feathers all stuck out so much they literally get blown over. Then they have to get up and dust themselves off and look around and see if the hen noticed what a klutz they were. They get themselves all puffed out again to look impressive. But their beard is quite prominent. Their neck gets all red and swollen and everything when they get excited over this hen. And like I said, she doesn't seem to care. So there you are. Another canoe trip. This is a kayak trip down Belgrade Stream, and came upon a rock. And this is, I can't tell you the size. There's no reference here for size, but I can tell you this snapping turtle probably weighed 25 pounds. It was a good sized one. And again, there's the eye. Just nice warm day, very pleased to be on that rock and was not bothered by my presence at all. There's some monsters in, I've seen others below the surface which were even bigger than this one. There's some monsters in the stream. Then out of the north window in my house one day, I look out there in the springtime and was encountered this. And she very nicely decided to lick her fawn just at the point that I was going to take a picture. So this is another one that I really enjoyed. She licked and licked and licked, but the spots were still there. And then out in the west exposure and back of my barn, the tree swallows moved in, my favorite bird. And this was the time of the year when the dragonflies had come out to eat the black flies. And unfortunately, tree swallows love dragonflies. So here's mom or dad, don't know which, who is feeding a mature chick a dragonfly whole. This whole procedure takes place in less than a second. So your camera needs to be instantly focused and taking pictures like crazy to be able to get something like this, which is not blurred, perfectly sharp, and occur at just the instant when that transfer is taking place. So I was very fortunate in that regard. It's happened to me on other times too. Here's a different location with a somewhat different appearance. That bird is so anxious to get a hold, he's about to fall out of the house. And you notice I like Phillips head screws. Again, the eyes here and both are in focus. Here's the wing. You know how fast they flutter. And again, managed to catch the camera, not me. The camera managed to do its work.
Unbelievable.
The other interesting thing about tree swallows is not only do they feed their young, but they'll disappear into the nesting box. They'll gather up all the waste material and reappear at the opening with a beak full of waste material, fly off someplace, usually a considerable distance from the nest, and drop it off, and then return to the nest. So they not only are they bringing in food, but they're doing housekeeping as well. I've been very fortunate over time to be able to get a couple of good action shots of eagles, and this was one of my favorites. This guy or gal was cruising in, this was last year, and had a nice, I think that's a bass, is it not, Dick?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Locked right in there. That fish is going nowhere. And I think that eagle's showing off saying, hey, look, man, I can hold on to this fish with one talon and I've got the other one to defend myself. So don't mess with me. So in coming the fish, and here's another one. This is a little further out. This is the same bird on the way in. At that point, had to hold the fish with both hands or paws, whatever. But I like this shot too. Boy, what concentration. There's the eye. Flying in, tail feathers all splayed right out.
Beautiful detail.
And remember I said surf and turf, so I was down at the other end of Long Pond one day and got this shot.
Big,
So that's an unfortunate gray squirrel.
big one.
Yep, big squirrel. So if you're one of these folks that has little teeny tiny dogs, keep an eye on them. Leafy may become breakfast. Hello there, Sue Ellen.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. So in the springtime, about this time of year, actually, we're a little bit late now, so we would probably be third week in May. The alewives come up the various rivers in Maine, and we've been fortunate now that the Kennebec River has been rehabilitated to have alewives come up. And one day in Hallowell, I was at the boat landing down there, the public dock, if you will, and it was feeding time. And so here comes an osprey with an alewife. Now, what these birds will do is they're very aware of aerodynamics. And so instead of carrying the fish crosswise, they will grab the fish and then they'll readjust it with their talons so that the fish is pointing in the same direction the bird is. And so the wind resistance diminishes considerably and the bird can fly with much more agility in that regard. And so here comes the bird and there we are. So you can see that the fish is not really in good shape. We can move this up a little bit. You can see he's got considerable damage from being previously gripped probably sideways. And now the bird, as I mentioned, has reassessed the situation and oriented the bird in a more aerodynamic fashion. You can even see the blood vessels in the fish's gills here. So let's see if we can move that a little further. I don't know how it's showing up on your screen. I think that's probably about the limit of resolution right there.
It's good.
Good, good. Okay, so we'll go back to normal size. And there's another eagle. This guy didn't have anything in his hand, or talon rather, but he was coming in, and I managed to get a good shot at the approach. So as I mentioned, the camera did most of that work, but as I mentioned at the very beginning of this talk, you don't have to have thousands of dollars worth of camera equipment to get some good nature shots. And so the next couple of pictures here are taken with an iPhone. And Kathy just does a wonderful job of growing flowers, and I also raise bees. So the combination sometimes makes for some good photography. So this is one of my girls, and apparently she likes poppy pollen. Now, whether she gets high on poppies or not, I have no idea. But anyway, she's going to get her pollen baskets back here are filled right up with pollen. She's going to bring that back crew at the hive, of which there are about 40,000 sisters working there. Here's another species of poppy, which is a bit more unique in terms of its coloration. Nice pink. These guys only last about a day. But again, this is iPhone technique, and you can fiddle with it a bit. They especially the Apple phones, in my estimation, do a really nice job. I know that Dick Greenan has one very similar to this, and I think Sue Ellen does as well. So you can get some nice pictures. I used the 2.5 magnification to get these pictures.
I'm here.
Good, good, good. Kathy and I were out at our camp last night, and I saw this huge spider sitting on the windowsill, and it took me a little while to realize that it was not a live spider. It was a leftover from last
Up
season.
here. You should come up.
left over from last season. And so this is just the exoskeleton of a spider. I think it's a water spider, but I held it up to a light bulb and took a picture of it with my iPhone. And it's really sort of an interesting anatomy. This is the attachment, obviously, of all of the 8 legs. And those are the rather nasty looking mouth parts. And of course, the which would have been, I guess, the egg-laying apparatus and spinnerets and so forth for the spider are back here. But this specimen is at least a year old because it's left over from last season. So it's an interesting type of photography you can do with something which is already sitting right in your pocket. This hawk showed up 2 years ago, shortly after I had a pair of potentially nesting. I'm blanking now on the name of the hawk, but they're small little hawks. We had a nesting box for them, and I was all excited because I thought we were going to have kestrels. I thought we were going to have a pair of kestrels in our back field. This hawk showed up, and it may have been coincidental or not, I'm not sure, but shortly after this hawk showed up in the back field, the female kestrel disappeared. Whether she was eaten by this hawk or driven off or what, I don't know, but the male looked quite forlorn for about a week or two until he finally gave up and left. So I was deprived of a nesting pair of kestrels that year. I was kind of sad. I didn't like this bird, even though he or she posed for me. And then we had one of these guys show up. It was a sort of a bookend, I guess, to the scarlet tanager. What I do sometimes is I'll plant a sunflower outside of our back window, and oftentimes you'll see pictures of birds on bird feeders, but somehow that always looks a little bit artificial. So I try to get a sunflower to grow up, and what's left over after the ice storms and so forth of winter makes a very nice natural perch. You see the feeder is up above the bird's head, but you'd never know it from this picture. It just looks like, oh, look at that nice picture of the bird. It's out there in the water and everything. It's about 2 feet outside of my window. So it's a nice way to cheat a little bit if you want to get some nice nature photography up close to your house. Plant a couple of sunflowers and keep them around after you cut off. Okay, a couple more interesting shots. Again, these are close-ups. This is actually done with a regular camera, not an iPhone, because these dragonflies are kind of skittish. You can't get that close to them without them flying off. But I show you this picture because once again, here's the eye with the light reflex. Obviously, it's not an eye because these guys have compound eyes, thousands of them, but the light reflection is kind of nice. And the thing about this is that the symmetry that these animals demonstrate is phenomenal. I mean, you look one side to the other and they just absolutely identical. So you think about the way that these are manufactured according to genetic code and so forth and so on. And it's absolutely fascinating to me how they get every single one of these little trapezoids or whatever they happen to be, identical on both wings. Beautiful stuff. Okay, so last but not least, we have this situation. This is not a hummingbird. It's something called a hummingbird moth. And it's about the size of my thumb. It's pretty sizable. And we have some phlox growing near our woodshed. And hummingbird moths really like this plant. And so they come here and they derive the nectar. You can see their little proboscis going into the flower and picking up some nectar. And at the same time, they're gratuitously picking up pollen to do the work for the plant. So they're both benefiting from this. So this creature right here was blithely flying around, sipping nectar and having a wonderful summer day until, drum roll, that happened. Anybody see what's going on here?
Wow.
Oh,
It's a hornet going after him?
He's gonna, yeah, something's got him.
Yeah.
It's a spider. It's a spider's perfectly camouflaged. I don't know if you can see my pointer. This is the center of the flower. This right here is a spider's head.
Oh my.
Yeah, and obviously these are his legs or her legs. This is probably a female spider, and her mouth parts are locked on the head of this moth, which is now paralyzed, no longer moving. dead moth. Absolutely phenomenal. I've never seen this before. I had never seen the spider in this plant. Didn't know this ever happened. But again, you know, you're out there just taking pictures and having a wonderful time, and all of a sudden there's death in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Oh, just to notice, here's this proboscis that you saw in the last picture here, and it's straight going into the flower. So obviously it's retractable, sort of spirals. Sort of like an elephant's trunk, I guess. I have no idea the mechanism, how they extend it or not, in terms of muscles or whatever, but it's pretty amazing to see. So anyway, that concludes, well, right on time. We're 1 minute early. You've actually seen 52 photographs here. It sort of went by pretty quickly for me. I hope it did for you as well. So it's been my pleasure. Thank you all for tuning in.
Alex, thank you. Thank you.
Alex.
Thank
Absolutely.
you very much. It's wonderful.
You're entirely welcome.
And
Okay, well, get
I
out
love-
there, take
Yeah.
pictures, enjoy yourselves, and let's hope that the weather doesn't get as hot as it did a few days back.
I really appreciate your insight in looking at the anatomy of everything and things that I never looked at. That one, the light coming down from up above on that loon or whatever it was earlier. You know, I had never picked up on that. So, I mean, you've picked up so many interesting facets that, boy, it's a lot to learn. Yeah, thank you.
It's a constant process learning about this stuff. It really is.
Yeah, Alex, I have two questions.
Yes.
Number one is, have you like scouted places where you know these eagles are going to be
Yes.
nesting or landing?
Yes. Yes. There are areas where I know I'm likely to see something. But you know, you have a lot of times when you go out there and see absolutely nothing. But yeah, there are areas which you frequent, like the snags on the way to Longfellows and above that farm. I always look. When I'm driving on the road, I'm surprised I haven't crashed more often because I'm not looking at the road a good part of the time. I'm looking up in the treetops.
And actually, I have three questions. The second question is, how often is it that you're just like walking around with the camera?
I almost always have it with me in the car. Motorcycle sometimes, but almost always I've got it in the car. So it's somewhat accessible to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I climb, you know, the mountain or some of the other places, I'll carry camera equipment with me more often for landscapes in that situation, because obviously you're doing that for the view.
Yeah. And number three, is there anything that you haven't shot as far as wildlife goes that you aspire to shooting?
Good question. A bear, perhaps. Yeah, black bear. I'd like to get a picture of a black bear. Yeah, with a nice telephoto lens from a distance. That is not going to be an iPhone picture, although I see idiots doing that type of thing. But that's my own personal opinion.
Alex, are there any major advantages between the D500 and the D810
Yeah.
Nikons?
Yes, it's the speed and the accuracy of the autofocus, and the magnification you get from having a digital size DX sensor as opposed to full frame. An 810 is a much better landscape camera, but if you're going to shoot wildlife, especially something that's moving, they haven't come up with anything that I know of. And I've got friends who are far more accomplished than I am that use D500s exclusively.
Okay.
You know, what happens with cameras, and Dick knows this, but some of the other folks may be interested to know. Once you get into photography with a sophisticated camera, the money that you invest is far more into lenses than it is the camera. And so after a while, you are branded not by the camera you prefer, but by the lenses you have. Because if you get a new camera, you want to be able to use them with the money that you've invested already in lenses that you have. You don't switch. brands. It's just too expensive to do that. So start with a good one, Canon or Nikon, someone, something that is easily accessible, has a good reputation, and there are lots of choices.
Okay. And so the D500, the lenses that I have on the D810 will fit my new D500 that I'll be ordering tonight, right?
Yes, they most certainly will. And Dick, you've got an advantage over me in this. I bought mine new. D500 has been on the market so long now, it's probably been depreciated. And since they don't build houses with it, it's probably not astronomically expensive.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Good. I want to thank Barbara and the library for sponsoring Alex in this event. It was phenomenal. Thank you for your foresight.
Oh, it was great. And this is part of our community read activities. We're having a community read this summer that's focused on the book called The Overstory by Richard Powers, which is all about trees in particular, but the importance of nature and the environment. And so we, along with Seven Lakes Alliance and the Belgrade Historical Society, are sponsoring a number of programs throughout the summer based on the themes of the book, The Overstory. So just keep a lookout for Seven Lakes and for Belgrade Historical Society. We're going to have things like historical logging video night, and I think there'll be some very interesting programs. We're actually having a discussion. We're having two different discussions of the book, The Overstory, which won the Pulitzer Prize in 2018 or 19, I forget. And we're actually having an author talk, a Q&A with the author at the end of August.
Awesome.
So just keep an eye out and start reading if you haven't already the Overstory. I read it once and now I'm listening to it, the audio version, and it's a fascinating book.
And the author is?
Richard Powers.
Thank you.
And there are copies available at Oliver and Friends if you'd like to purchase one, and they're also available at the library
Thank you.
for loan.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you all, and thank you all.
Okay, thank you,
everybody, for
Alex.
coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Nice weekend all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.